when it is 0, blue will shoot. And this done function over here is used throughout just to return. So it's just a call to a return. Now this is how red shoots over here. It's first off generating the sound of the shot. So this is the sound of the shot. We had to manually test the voice effects in MIPS, in Mars specifically, this environment, because it does offer syscalls for sound. And we found this one to be appropriate for shooting. This is to draw red shooting if red does indeed shoot. And here it will check if their positions are in front of each other. S0 and S1, as we recall, are the positions of red and blue. If red shoots, so after red shooting immediately, we check if red and blue are facing each other. If they were facing each other at the time of red shooting, then that means that blue should take damage. And this happens here accordingly. There is a method under that deals with blue getting damaged. Here is a slight delay just to avoid any inconsistencies. And here we're just redrawing everyone and going back to the input loop. So we have to keep calling the input loop throughout in order to enable the users to constantly keep inputting as the game goes on and not prevent them from inputting as something else is happening. So this is why a call to the input loop is usually present in most parts of the code, as well as drawing red and blue, because we want them to keep drawing the ships as they move. Even if they're shooting or not, we still want them to be there. We don't want the game to stop. That's the point of it being a dynamic game, so everything's being redrawn constantly, input is constantly being taken. Here's the same logic, but for blue shooting and red getting damaged. Now here's where blue or red gets damaged. This is drawing the ship getting damaged, and this is the health being decremented. Also, the health is updated accordingly, according to a series of 15 or 16 cases, I believe, of different possible combinations of health. That is an exhaustive and pretty convoluted part of the code. However, it is necessary for the game's progress. So we can also see the loop, the input loop, and the drawing of the ships constantly being called. Now we get into the update health. I'm going to go over this really quickly because it's most of the same, except it deals with every single case. So here we'll check first off for the health in T7. I'm pretty sure that corresponds to red. So we'll check first off red's health, and then it will go accordingly. If red's health is 3, then it will go through the options through B equals. If red's health is 3 and blue's health is either 3, 2, 1, or 0, which one it will call. So each case is well labeled here. All the different combinations are available. As you can see, it checks for red's health first and then compares it with a combination of blue's health and calls the case accordingly. Now the cases are very, very exhaustive, but they all do the same thing, and that is redraw the health bar accordingly, either adding enough red pixels so that it decrements to either 1 health or 2 health or 3 health or 0 health, and the game ends. And this is what deals with the logic of the game ending itself. So here we have, if both their healths are 3, we're not going to do anything, so we just call the exit method. The exit method is another method that we use often in this code besides the one that is done. Done is a return. Exit is just a call to a return, I believe, as well, although this was due to us intermixing our code once we were done. Someone had named it done and someone named it exit. They both do the same thing, so it wasn't really an issue. So here it's the drawing and changing of the health bar accordingly. This was all hand-drawn, specifically hand-drawn. All of these cases were hand-drawn. Each and every single base position was also selected very carefully according to the case and according to the player's health. So this is a very, very huge part of the code. It spans several hundred lines, but it is very necessary for the game's logic and is a crucial part of the program. Now we're getting close to the end, so here are some things that have to do with game over. So as we said, the logic that has to do with the health bars is the one that decides whether or not the game ends or not. So here we see that if a health bar reaches 0, then a game over screen the game over of the game is called. Now, one of them is for red and one of them is for blue. I think it is understandable to say that I kind of got a bit lost when reading this because, as I said, when we mixed our codes together, it was up to each and every individual who wrote his own code to explain what it did. Obviously, comments were added, but this is 1,000 lines. Hopefully, comments can be added at the time of submission. It's not really a big deal. So here, the game overs are called accordingly. So if player one, I think here, yes, here if player one loses, they will call game over player one. And here it also deals with game over player two. So when player two loses as well, which should be above somewhere, because these cases are all exhaustive. So yes, they do encompass everything. Yep, there it is, game over player two. So when player two reaches 0 health and player one has still has some health. So there at no point will both of them have 0 health. This is dealt with elegantly by these cases. So if just one of them hits 0, a game over screen is immediately called. As we can see, this is apparent when here it was done in this case and here it was done as well. This is to say that no matter what situation the other player is in, if the other his health is 0, khalas, you're done. So now we go to the game over screen. This is the sound that plays when the game ends. It's that sound of like a kind of sound. It's like a cool ending, fitting to like a ship sinking or like a battle ending. And some delay I think is used here, yes, as well, in order to avoid issues with consistency or whatever. And the end screen here is called to draw it. So this is also the same logic of drawing. So this draws the end screen for if player two loses, and here if it's for player one loses. So if player two lost, then player one wins, and if player one lost, then player two wins. These both work the same. However, at the end of the end method, there is a call to the main. Main, if we recall, is all the way at the beginning, which is why at the end of every match of Battleship, you see the start menu again and you can play again. It brings you back to the start and you can play as much as you want until you exit the game. Now this is exit as well. It's just a call to return, similar to done. There's another one which is exit terminate, which is only used really when the E button is pressed on the start menu. This is called to terminate the program. This is how the program actually ends when the users decide to end it. So now here is the input loop. This input loop works in a method called polling. This method was discussed during a tutoring session. The premise of it is that it uses the MMIO simulators receiver data here, so this address specifically, to take in input. And it compares it to the ASCII values of the input given in according to, for example, B equal, if the ASCII value is 115, which corresponds to the letter S, 101 corresponds to the letter E, and it compares them at that specific part of that specific address to see if the input corresponds to that specific ASCII value. So there are two separate input loops, one for the main menu itself, so here's for start and E, and a second one for the player's input. It is called red input, although it does deal with the input of both red and blue. This is obviously constantly called during the game, as previously shown. This is to enable the players to constantly move and the game to stay dynamic. Finally, at the end of the code, we have the moving and the drawing of the ships themselves, the methods that draw them. Yani. Why these are at the end? Because when we tried putting them in the middle of the code, or when we tried putting them anywhere else really in the code, it would cause severe errors in the bitmap display. Things would just draw completely wrong, pixels would go everywhere, glitches, just things not drawing at all. So when we put them at the end, essentially it fixed the flow. So the drawing of ships, which is constantly done, and mostly anything that is constantly done in the game, should be at the end of the file, of the code. This is also apparent for the input loops. This is why they are also right at the end, but they are not quite at the end because they also call the moving, so the moving has to be at the end. Now here, these are just drawings corresponding to those hex arrays that we showed at the start. These encompass all the possible movements and cases that could possibly be for red and blue. The only thing noteworthy here is when red moves or blue moves, it changes the S0 or S1 registers as value accordingly, so as to denote their position. S0 and S1, as previously discussed, denote the positions of the ships. It also does not allow the ship to decrement in a way that makes the counter in an invalid range. So if, let's say, S0 is already to the far left, it will not allow him to move further left. It will just go back to the input loop. And same goes for the right, so over here, and same thing for blue. And these are for drawing the ships. These base addresses were also carefully chosen in order to draw them in those specific margins of the bitmap display so that it does not cause any issues or overlap with the other graphics that are present for the game, and in order to save memory and save time, in just drawing, not having to redraw the whole screen again. That would just cause the game to be unbearably slow. And this is how we achieved a pretty smooth and quick kind of fast-paced game where the ships can be constantly moving and shooting, and there are no real issues with performance in that regard. Also drawing the boom, the ship shooting, and the damage where a ship is being damaged also is all dealt with over here. Accordingly, if blue is on the right and he's damaged, for example, it will draw the screen that corresponds to the blue ship being on the right and having flames coming out of it. And these are all really just drawings. The hex values up at the beginning of the file in the .data section really are what these represent, and these are just drawing them. As we have previously discussed, drawing deals on a pixel by pixel level because we're dealing with memory at the lowest levels, like we're right before zeros and ones, so this is how drawing is dealt with. So that is the game, that is the code. Hopefully it should be clear. A lot of work was put into this. The work was, unfortunately, I have to say this for the sake of clarity, not 100% evenly distributed, but that was really due to certain unfortunate circumstances that occurred for certain members of the team at like the worst possible times. The logic itself, in its most general sense, was devised by myself. However, most of the debugging, if not all of it, was done by the other two members, Tariq Al-Saleh and Ilyas Al-Khwairi, and more specifically by Tariq Al-Saleh. Drawing the health, drawing the health bars themselves, pardon. Drawing the health bars themselves and choosing all those positions and cases was dealt entirely by Ilyas Al-Khwairi. In addition to debugging them, because they did face some issues when we had to mix the code together. They were overlapping with the ships and they were not updating. So the debugging that had to do with them was also dealt with by Ilyas with some help by Tariq. The input taking and the logic that connected it to all the other parts of the code was done by myself, but debugging and putting them in the right order and fixing the flow and fixing register conflicts was also done by Tariq Al-Saleh. So essentially, and oh yes, before I forget, all these drawings, game over, ships booming, damaging, moving left, moving right, all these graphics were also drawn by Tariq Al-Saleh, and the hex values were also generated. He also brought them over using software, proprietary software off of the web. All in all, this is our game. I hope it is satisfactory. This video will be uploaded alongside the first part, which was just a showcase of the game itself. I will also be uploading a report which details how the game works and the parts that each of us contributed to it in a written form, as well as this this game file itself. Thank you very much for your attention. This was Battleship, and I thank you.